Hey everyone. Hey, real quick. I just want to check to see if you're a member of the coaches site, because if you're not and you're tuning into the show, well, you probably should be. There is no cost or commitment to sign up, and you're going to be connected to a community of over 35,000 coaches representing 54 countries and 25% of the hockey coaches globally. Click the link in the show description below to get started. We'll even throw in a 10-day free trial so you get full access to our suite of premium content featuring some of the top coaches in the game, including many who have appeared on the Glass Now podcast. If you love coaching, you're going to love the coaches site. And now, on to the show. So, Meghan, how does a kid from Massachusetts who grew up a fan of the Boston Bruins end up in Wisconsin?
Yeah, I've gotten that question a lot. That's the age-old one. Yeah, it really was. I mean, in short form, I was just blown away by Wisconsin when I went out there. The second I went on my visit, and then when I was on the plane ride home, I pretty much committed at that moment. It was everything from, the coaches, the team, the city, that big time Big Ten athletics, the facilities. I'm obviously a proud Badger alum, but even back then, I just felt nothing compared. I still feel that way. My parents were a little heartbroken. I think it could have been, it would have been nicer for them had I stayed around to one of the Boston schools. And, no disrespect to any of those schools, which are, they're amazing programs. They have great facilities, fantastic history and teams, but it was just the right fit for me. And everyone says, when and that was it. I just was, how can I not choose this place? And like I said, that's still how I feel to this day.
Well, it's funny, literally just had dinner a couple nights ago with a friend whose son is entering his first year with the hockey team there. And he was just had to listen to him go on for about 45 minutes. Oh, they've got this, they've got this. And I was like, hey, I get it. Wisconsin's awesome, but it does sound like a really special place.
It is.
And, and not only that, I mean, Mark Johnson, the head coach there, who's just had a remarkably consistent run of just always being in the fight. I counted 3 national championships while you were there. Just given what you went on to do as a player, and now in your current role, it would just appear that was a really unique opportunity to cut your teeth in so many ways that set you up for the future.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's back then when I was making the decision, right, I had these lofty goals and dreams of what I wanted. I wanted to ultimately, from when I was a young kid, watching the 98 Olympics and watching that Team USA women win gold, I set my sights, I want to go on, I want to play for Team USA, I want to go to the Olympics, I want to win a gold medal. And so then, fast forward a few years later, now I'm in this, college recruiting process. And here I am to come face to face with Mark Johnson, who, any American passionate about the Olympics, I wanted to go to the Olympics and win a gold medal, and who better to learn from? And so obviously his coaching and playing pedigree stood for themselves. But beyond that, just in terms of the type of person and human being he is, the relationship that I built with him, the respect that he has, the kind of humility that he leads with, and just, the impression you get right from meeting him for the first time, this is someone that I want to be my mentor. I want to learn from, both on and off the ice. I want to help me develop my leadership skills. I want to spend time with. And so that's how I felt as an athlete. And I know my parents, meeting him, same thing. Okay, my daughter's going to go halfway across the country. She's 17, 18 years old. This is the type of human being I want her, again, led by, learning from. So it was just a perfect marriage of all those things. And obviously I've stayed in touch and stayed close with Coach Johnson and the program, and, and just what he's continued to do there, alongside his other assistants and just all the players he's had in there. He has had that level of success for, a reason, obviously. And I was just thankful, that I made that decision and got the opportunity to play for him. And, he's stayed a mentor for me over these last, 15 years ago I graduated. So Yeah, just a great guy. And when I think back on making that decision, he's was a critical part of it.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the relationships, and in the same way that you would have, effectively entrusted your dream and invited him to be kind of a part of making that a reality. I mean, you're working now with a lot of players that have a similar type dream, and all of a sudden you're part of that equation of maybe that making that a reality, and obviously one that is doesn't come to fruition for everybody. But you know where does that relationship piece come in, and perhaps what have you learned about building a relationship that lets people know that you've got their back?
Yeah, I think I was actually just having a conversation like this with a colleague in New Jersey this past week, and um, I think you know, regardless of what industry you're in, obviously we're in the hockey industry, managing people and players, and all of this, but regardless of what industry you're in, I think first and foremost is relationships, like how you interact with anyone you work with on a daily basis, how you make them feel, how they make you feel, the leadership and respect and vulnerability aspects in that, and that's something that I think of every single day in the job that I'm in right now, whether it's my staff and people I'm working with, or the players. We expect so much from these players, right? They're 19,
So much, yeah.
20, 21 years old. They're still, sometimes I think, I forget that they're that young. We're working with teenagers sometimes in my role, and we put a lot on them. And at the end of the day, I have to remind myself, like, some of these guys are just still like little boys. They're just becoming a man, right? And they have so
Yeah.
much to learn, and they're still figuring out like how to do everything and manage it all. And so I think first and foremost, like always leading, whether it's with the players or, like I said, staff, just with that personal aspect. And that starts with, if you haven't seen someone in a while, like before you're jumping into business, like, how's it going? How's the family?
Yeah.
Hey, oh my gosh, you got married. How was the wedding? Like, congrats on the new baby. Like, all these things that in our business can be forgotten sometimes because, you get into this grind of the NHL season, and there's not a lot of time. There's not a lot of headspace. It's day after next, things popping up, and, you're on the ice. How do we get this player to be better? Lots of just, hard grinding conversations. And so I think finding the right way to make sure that like relationship and that personal aspect is exists every day is so important to the long-term success of the team, and winning, which is what we all want to do.
Well, you mentioned just the grind, and I mean clearly your role at the end of the day is to help as many of these players become NHL full-time NHL um, players, and I would wonder if we were to use, and not every player obviously is on board into your organization through the NHL draft, but if we use that as an example, how long does it take, from when a player is drafted, assuming most come to development camp, but at what point have you had enough interaction with that player, or, have you and your staff had interaction with that player to say, okay, we've got a good enough feel now that we can start putting that development plan together and maybe start identifying some of the strengths and areas for improvement. And I would imagine that with all of that being said, that there's probably with each of these players, there's a nuance from just the personality, like, the mental side of the game. Like it's not as black and white as we might think.
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there at the end. I think, like, first and foremost, I would say that's the biggest, yeah, to your point, like just nuance of the whole situation. They're all so different, every single player. Like the group of guys I kind of, let's say manage right now, it's about a pool of 35 players, and each one of them, is just so different, different background, communicates in a different way, has a different path, projection. And so I think, being able to understand that, communicate through that with my staff, and then individualize each player as much as we can, is certainly a huge priority. But in terms of kind of like how we get to know them, how quickly we get to know them, it's evolved a little bit, to be honest. Like, this is my fifth season, so my first and second season, trying to get a feel for a little bit like who are we and what do I do, and like how do I do my job, right? There was a little bit
Yeah.
of that early on. I know the game really well, and I've been around it a long time. I have all this experience, but shifting to okay, this is my role. How am I going to make the most out of it and help us best maximize what we want to do? And so I think initially, first couple of years took a little bit longer to get to know the players. Maybe it was like, obviously, we introduce ourselves right away. We meet them right away. They come to camp. We're in touch with them. And then we would start building out their kind of individual development profiles, more like, say, if they were a collegiate player, like second half
Sure.
after Christmas, right? Get some viewings in, talk about them a little bit, understand their game. And now I don't know if it's just, my lack of patience or just like the urgency that I want to lead with. Now it's more, we get to know them again right away. They come to development camp. And now we're a little bit off and running sooner, like want to create those plans. We can always adjust them, right, as we get to know them better. But, want to have one or two key things that we want to see them working on, from October to January. You want to discuss those points and make them aware and add in all these other layers, right, of the sports science piece or the mental performance. And so I think now it's just like an attack now mentality a little bit. Get on it right away, build out, who this player is, where we think they can go. And a lot of that early on is just through, discussions and debriefs with our amateur scouting staff. When they kind of, to your point, if it's a drafted player, when they scout these guys and we draft them, at that point, they're the ones that know more about them than we do,
Sure.
right? And so picking their brains about what did you see? Obviously reading all the reports and watching video, but actually talking to them. Like, what's your honest projection of this player? What's the probability he hits it? Why, if he doesn't hit it, why not? And if he does,
Yeah.
what does he need to help him get there? And so we're doing a little bit of that earlier now. It's an exciting part of the job. I think bringing in new guys is always fun. There's so much potential there. And, they're so young and you're excited to kind of work with them on their path.
Well, I think the average fan, we've become accustomed where some of these teenagers, they get drafted and immediately they're making an impact in the National Hockey League. But I believe that the average age that a player first cracks an NHL roster full time is 23 years old. So there's for most players, there's a significant runway there. And you just touched on the goal is to maybe give them one to two things to work on. But I mean, you look at gosh, it wasn't that long ago that NHL players were coming to training camp to get in shape. Like the
Yeah.
game has changed a lot. And now we've got, there's the mental side, the physical side. There are so many inputs. I guess, important is it to maybe, narrow that focus down to one or two areas versus trying to get better at everything all at once?
Yeah, great point, and hugely important. And again, I think something in the these 4 or 5 years on the job, I've really started to learn about and focus on. Obviously, like all of us as people, all of these guys as players, you go through a long season. There's a million things that they can be working on, and it's everything from the high level, like player needs to improve like skating and separation speed, to more granular details about different components of a shot, or certain stick positioning on the PK. Like there's so many things that come up. But the way I like to look at it, almost in like this overarching way and long term with our players, especially some of our younger guys right now that maybe they've signed their pro contracts and they're going to be in spending some time in Utica this season, but we're projecting them as NHL players. You think about, okay, if this player from September to April, May, if we focus on these one or two things, which are maybe a little bit, on the more high level side, obviously there's a lot of components in them, but if we focus on these one or two things, if from the start of the year to the end of the year, he has taken a step here, he has improved, like that's a win on the development side. And, if say one of them is, a defenseman, like needs to just kind of like sort things out a little bit sooner, make a cleaner, more crisp, like first pass. Like
Yeah.
that's it. There's so many elements inside of that, right? Whether it's the video work going into like how he reads the game, whether it's, his skating, his footwork, whether it's just really like touch on the puck, going back, retrievals, all of that. There's so many elements in there. But our one thing will be, okay, from September until April, we want him to grow in this area. And then we'll look at it at the end of the year. So I kind of like to look at it like that. And I find we're able to really allocate our resources better that way, as I said, like from a skill and skating coach perspective. But when you start having like too many people talking about too many things, and it's not organized, like it can become tricky. In my first couple of years in the job, it was, trying to sort through some of that, and get us a little bit better aligned on a plan and how people are factoring in and not overwhelming the player and all of that.
Well, I just want to touch on some of the, I guess, skills that you just referenced. And, we all admit that, there's so much more information available in hockey through analytics. But I would still say that hockey is unique in that relative to other sports, in that there's so much that we can't measure, or that's maybe perhaps
Totally.
more challenging to measure. So, I mean, you talk about, separation speed or making a crisp pass. With when you're talking with prospects about these aspects of their game, is there a way that you can measure that, or is it purely through, just as you said, watching video or getting a coach's feedback, or how do you sort of let them know? Because I imagine for them, it's helpful. I mean, it's great to say, hey, you're doing better at making crisp passes, but I think so many kids today are just wired to have, like, hard data that says, hey, you went from a 2 to a 5.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I would say, that's it's such an important question right now, like in hockey. Obviously, we've
Yeah.
seen, in our group in particular, like we've seen a lot of just like robust analytics staffs popping up. Definitely, in other sports and now in hockey in the last 10 or 15 years. And I'm proud to say in Jersey, like we have, what I feel is one of the best.
You
Like
got some smarty pants over
yeah,
there.
we have some smarty pants. It's a great group. They're super helpful in explaining. Like I didn't grow up and I didn't play like with an analytics really background or all of that. So what I've learned about analytics in the last 4 or 5 years, just in this role, is amazing, and it's changed my perspective and the way that I view things in a lot of different ways, and I find it helpful. I think where we're at right now is like everyone's trying to find like what is that balance of the eye test and just someone saying like he looks like he's improved here, right, on a consistent basis or
Yeah.
not, versus what does the data say. um, and the way I like to see it is just everyone, all of us as like scouts or player evaluation or player development, trying to get these guys better is, we all have the ways that we work, we all have our opinions, what we see, our biases, and being able to talk about that. And then we all now can use all this supplementation, all this support data from the analytics, from sports science, from mental performance, to help guide us, to ask us questions. A lot of times the way I use analytics is, they'll flag something that, hey, our data is actually showing that player. Say we think a player is, first couple steps is not good. He's not explosive enough. He can't separate. And if they're finding data that's tracking a player in terms of like how quickly he's getting around the ice, and they find, that he is, right. So start
Yeah.
asking questions like, am I seeing it wrong? Is, what's going on? Or is the data wrong? And so, um, yeah, so our group is working really hard on finding all sorts of ways to identify and to measure like every area, the main areas in hockey, right? Hockey sense, skating, puck skills, compete, physicality. And so they're always providing us data that we feel, is showing like these small ways that guys are making gains or not. And we're just still working through that with them. And the best thing is that they're, they're really open to, um, our feedback and like how they make adjustments, and then how they provide us feedback on a very consistent basis. And so, yeah, but I would agree. Players, they want to see it, right? They want to see the hard numbers. The guys, how much his weight changes or his body fat, like those are real hard measurable numbers. But I would say, like with the help of our group in Jersey, like we have pretty robust analytical data, on every player, on any given game, on any given night, which is great.
Well, so you mentioned hockey sense, and I would imagine that would say that the draft reports or scouting reports that your scouts provide, if it was, they were talking about, say, a defenseman with their stick, it would probably say, like, Megan's got a really good stick, she's able to break up plays one on one, she's able to defend passing lanes, and there's probably these like list of things. But then when it comes to like hockey sense, I could see where that's maybe a little bit trickier to articulate what that looks like. Um, uh, but also equally as important to have a definition, I would think, as an organization, so that everybody's on the same page. How would you define hockey sense, and that if there was a player where that was deemed an area that they could improve in, like how do you go about improving that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Hockey Sense is one of those that I find probably alongside like compete and work ethic, like the most critical aspect of a
Yeah.
player. I think those with like tremendous hockey sense just jump out right away. The way that I kind of, I guess, see it, evaluate it, understand it is a player's just ability to move through the game, see things ahead of others, just have like this general like flow and feel of the game that allows them to play at a faster pace, allows them to engage, allows them to like be in spots that others just can't, or aren't there as fast as they are. And so it's a really hard one to nail down. I think on the probably on the scout player evaluation like eye test side, it's almost like it's like a feeling. It's kind of like a feeling when you watch the game.
Yeah.
For me, like how a guy moves through the game and makes decisions and sense and read and for the game. And again, on the analytics side, I know that they're looking into a variety of different ways that we can kind of nail that down and measure it. Um, but yeah, I think like with hockey sense, a way to develop it probably from my perspective is a lot of video with the player. Like
Yeah.
you pull up a scenario, you stop it and say like, what's the play here? What's the move here? And that's even tricky because they're getting a little bit of time to actually see. Whereas like we know it happens in real time that fast, but obviously, no one in this industry is. It's not a secret how much video work is done, whether it's on coach, player development. Players this day and age are really eager to want to see video all the time after the game and go through certain scenarios, and that's a way I think you help develop hockey sense. And then obviously, I think a key piece that goes into hockey sense as well is a little bit of almost just like the mental performance aspect.
Yeah.
How a player prepares mentally, whether it's just the mindset that you're in, the breath control, like different things like that. Anytime something's happening at a split second and you have a clear head and you're able to make a decision, a positive, helpful decision or something you should be doing. Like I know that the mental aspect plays into that. Um, and so, we look into that a little bit as it relates to hockey sense. But yeah, it's a tricky one to nail down for sure. And like I said, like for me personally, when I'm watching or doing player evaluation scouting, it's like a feeling I get sometimes when watching.
No, I think that's totally fair. And, and obviously I think one thing that's interesting that you mentioned is you know, the perception of what you see on video versus what a player sees in that moment on the
Right.
ice and how fast it is. And I would
Like
imagine that
we all know it's easy to break down the game from a bird's eye view.
we
It's
can all
such
play
so
Madden. We can all play
exactly,
Madden. Different. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would imagine, just from your playing background, that being able to offer that perspective, or at least being able to keep that top of mind, that perhaps what you're seeing is, being able to relate back to what you would see as a player are two different things. And, with that being said, if I'm doing the math correctly, I think you were 26, 27 when you were presented the opportunity to be the captain of Team USA. Maybe just starting there, like how did that? There's 32 NHL teams. There's only one Team USA. How was that opportunity presented to you?
Yeah, I mean, what a tremendous honor, first of all.
Yeah,
I had at that point, I think I was just going to my second Olympics. So I had been through one and had been that like young, wide-eyed, newbie on the team. But prior to that, I had been kind of building my whole life for that moment. I think I grew up, I was kind of just an outgoing, confident young kid that was really competitive and just naturally, because of those reasons, like fell into leadership roles, whether it was in high school or in college. And so I think then, headed into my second Olympics to be given that opportunity ahead of Sochi this was a whole new beast, right? And I realized, quickly at that time that, yeah, like I had a lot of tools from experiences I had, but I was still really raw. I had a lot to learn. And from then on out, moving forward, it became as much of my like physical and mental training was important in those two Olympics, 14 and 18,
yeah,
that I had the opportunity to captain. and all the teams in between, it was like focusing on my leadership development, seeking support, challenging myself, trying to find new ways to lead in the right way. That became just as important of a part of my training and preparation. And what I will say is, like, what I learned as well is, that process of that leadership development is really not linear, as anyone
Yeah.
can attest to. But so many ups and downs, so many leadership like moments of failure, from my perspective. And so just how I kind of learned and grew through that, I think and the experiences I've had, I think have helped me now in this next role, and where I'm at right now, with work, and where I'm at as a parent, and all of that kind of stuff. Um, and so it was, my experience as a leader was unbelievable. Like I said, what an honor. Had great support, worked really hard at it, had some ups and downs, learned a lot. But I would say, like, I always come back to like a couple things with leadership, and it's kind of speaks to what we were talking about earlier in terms of just relationships. And I just always think, like, one of the most important things with leadership is, that connection piece, just how you relate and how you connect with your people on a daily basis. It's not always easy. There was a lot of times I was really lonely and on an island in leadership. And sometimes that connection just was, having the confidence to say the hard thing that no one wanted to hear, right? Like, that's what connection and relationships are all about too. So I think that's critical. And then I always think about, like, the trust piece, like, especially if you're leading a team, you're in the locker room, you always have that kind of, you want your teammates to be able to come to you at any given time. You want kind of, sometimes what happens in the locker room stays in the locker room, whether it's like deep discussions with the team, whether it's different things that we're going through. And so just making sure your teammates really trust you. And that's not an easy thing, in any industry. And then I think the last thing I always think about is, and I talk about this a bit now, and this is something that I wish I did more in my, like, hockey, like, captain leadership journey, was the ability to, like, just be vulnerable, just to say, like, I don't know everything. I'm still learning. Sometimes in leadership roles, I found in the past, you can get caught up in just like, gosh, I got to have all the answers. I got to, like, lead my team. I have to be
Yeah.
the one to do it. I have to figure it out. And kind of what I learned and what I'm trying to apply now in my life is, like, the best leaders I know and the ones that I want to be are really those vulnerable ones that ask questions. They're always learning, and always trying to find the best new ways to lead. And they're not afraid to say to, if you're a young kid, you're not afraid to say to someone on your team who's younger than you, like, hey, wow, that was awesome. Like, can you teach me that? Can you help me with that? Even if you're supposed to be, like, this big dog leader.
Yeah.
And so I think those are
Love
a
that.
couple of important aspects that I learned about leadership. But yeah, I mean, back to your original question, like, when I first kind of got chosen to lead that group, like, I was very raw, and learned a lot along the way.
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about, like, we're based in Vancouver, and every NHL team pumps out a lot of content. But it was the beginning of last season. The Canucks put out a video, and it was on Quinn Hughes, and it was sort of like a Cribs episode, I guess. And they were,
Yeah,
like, going around his apartment or whatever. And one of the things that, and I sensed the way it was sort of presented, that it wasn't maybe a part of the script, but they just observed that there's, like, a stack of books in his apartment, and they're like, hey, like, what are you a reader? Like, what are these? And they're all, like, books on leadership. And he's a pretty stoic, uh I can call him a young man, but um his answer was just I think really transparent. He's like, yeah, he's like, I've never done this before, like, of course I'm gonna get better. And it just dawned on me, like, so much. And I was thinking of you, that obviously, part of the prerequisite to that job is that you've got some of these traits, but it would also be like, is this a person that's going to, like, lean in and get better and try and get better, and understand that there's skills here that can be acquired, to improve. And that's just, and I imagine with the players you're dealing with now, like, that's all part of the journey, right? It's just a little, are we investing in ourselves?
for sure, for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's guys like that. That's a great point. Like, there's guys in that group of 35 players right now, say, that are in our kind of development phase, that just through working with them and getting to know them and knowing their background, like, in my mind, I'm like, these are guys that could run a room someday. Like, they have kind of those really just, like, natural innate qualities and abilities. And so I'm already thinking, if this is a player that we're going to commit to long term, like, what are the things that we can do in these next couple of years to, advance some of this, right? Because if this guy's going to be running a room in 5, 10 years in the NHL, like, love for him to have, if it's with us, would love for him to have, kind of the opportunity to hone in on some of his skills, like to learn, to be put in positions to grow in those areas. So I've just been recently thinking about that, and yeah, it's to your point and your question of just you have these skills, but then what? Like, what can we
Yeah.
do, right? And I'm always trying to do the same thing, and just taking in information from conversations I'm having and things that I'm learning. Like, when I think about what's next for me or where I want to go, like I always want to be learning from those that are doing it well or not, and writing down like, ooh, gosh, I hope I don't do it that
Yeah.
way. So
Totally.
yeah,
Totally.
there's so many learning opportunities around all of us when it comes to leadership that it's great to take advantage of them.
Well, I think another area where you'd have some firsthand experience is handling pressure. I mean, I would look to the 2018 gold medal game. That was a bit of a nail biter.
Just a
The
bit.
shootout, yeah. But so and I think about that because I imagine if I'm for example, a prospect on the Devils, if we had a time machine and we went back 20 years ago, if I'm at a junior hockey rink somewhere in North America or a rink in Europe, and I throw a pizza up the ice, turn the puck over, and it ends up in my net. Like there's a chance that never lands on Meghan Duggan's radar. If I'm a player now, I know that like everything I do, good or bad, is going to be seen.
I'll
Like it's
see
just
it.
it,
Yeah.
and yeah, and I think about these young kids now. Like I mean, gosh, talk about being under the microscope. Like they
Yeah.
must feel like I just don't see how they wouldn't internalize that pressure, right?
Hmm.
How might you counsel some of these prospects in terms of how they handle pressure, whether that's in the evaluation process or perhaps your one of your prospects is competing for an NCAA championship or a Memorial Cup?
Yeah, no, it's a great and it's a great question. And sometimes we put the pressure on them, right? Like they come into our training camps or our development camps, and we say like we expect a lot out of you guys. Like this is what we expect. We expect you to be competitive. Like we expect you to do all of these things. And so I'm very aware sometimes of how they're feeling in those, sitting in those seats. Like I've sat in those seats, right? Like how
Yeah,
it feels to go into your first Frozen Four, right, for our
sure.
college guys. And I actually, like, last year had one of our college guys who was at the Frozen Four send me a message when I was checking in on, like, hey, have a great time, it's going to be awesome, enjoy it. And he's like, yeah, you've played in a few of these, like, any tips, and I love those moments like that where you do kind of get that personal back and forth, that relationship. And like I think for these young guys, again, we started the conversation talking about this, like, we expect so much from them at such a young age. And constantly asking them, you got to improve here, you got to work on this, and you got to show up and be ready to go. And I think at the end of the day, like, just remembering that they're people, they're going to have hard times, they're going to have off days, they're going to have off practices, and not just, writing them off right away because of that. And I think that's what our group, on the development side in Jersey, we try to pride ourselves on is like really like knowing the players. Like I want to know if, they just had a string of like 4 exams and they weren't sleeping and now they're going into a Friday
Yeah,
night game and they're exhausted and they play terrible. I mean, they're human, right? Like we all did that. I did that in college. And I want to know if, someone's loses a grandparent or breaks up with their girlfriend or whatever it
yeah,
is. And so that's what we try to do. And just to kind of help that narrative of,
yeah.
he played awful. Like he's really struggling right now. He's had 2 terrible weeks. Like what's going on? Instead of writing him off or just getting pissed at the kid, digging a little bit deeper into the why. And, in our case, it's a lot of just like I said, like that relationship building, like getting to know them as people, having that personal aspect, I think is so critical in this industry because it's so easily overlooked. And I don't ever want it to be overlooked on my watch because I just believe in it so much.
Well, you know what? I think about this a lot as I get older. That the relationships that matter most to me are the people where I can be really transparent about when things are shitty, and they can help you kind of find solutions or sometimes maybe just listen. And I can imagine that in your industry that probably plays out as well. So I'm trying to go back 5 years ago when you get hired by the Devils.
Yeah.
And I don't have a time machine, but I'm willing to bet that if you had gone through every NHL team's website and looked at their hockey operations department. Yeah, I'm willing to bet that you probably only needed one hand to count the amount of people that looked like you
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
those operations. And
Very
I'm trying to
few.
think, yeah, and I'm trying to think like, I'm sure that, you're the captain of Team USA. I'm sure that you could have knocked on a lot of doors in a lot of industries, and there would have been some opportunities. Maybe the one to place your bet on isn't the one where there doesn't seem to be a lot of women excelling. How did you? How did you? I guess both think about the opportunity to stay in hockey, particularly in the NHL, but also like, when you made that decision, like how did you approach, say, this is how I'm going to approach this, to maybe whether it's putting people at ease or just to demonstrate that, I'm as or more capable than other candidates.
Yeah, it's a story. It's kind of a story I love to think about and talk about right now, because there's been like a handful of like connections in there that have come full circle. And I think for me at the time, I had retired probably a year or so just before that from playing. I was recently married. I had just given birth to my oldest now, George, my son, and he was about, I think at the time, like just over one, maybe one and a half. And we were all like coming out of COVID a little bit, and so it was a really natural like transition time for me to think about, okay, like what's next, right? And that's like a really scary, daunting time period for any retired athlete. Like there's so much out there that's like that, like that kind of like post Olympic letdown, or like any athlete transitioning, like how hard that was. So I was kind of at like the right in the middle of that, but I really wanted to get ahead of it and think about, okay, how can I be proactive, right? Like how can I figure out how my skills can apply to what I want to do next? And so it's pretty easy to, think I want to stay close to the game. Like I was still so passionate about it. I really didn't think about anything else, but I knew that I wanted to get involved in the NHL. I always loved hockey, grew up, as you said, in Boston. I was a Bruins fan growing up. My wife and I like watch hockey all the time. Like we're just a big hockey family. And so I knew, you know, wanted to really see like, okay, what's the NHL like? Like, what does the landscape look like? What does someone with my skill set, like, where can I add value? And that's really how I approached it. I thought back on, I had a lot of people over the course of like my playing career, different events I was at, different tournaments I was at, that had said, hey, Megan, like if you ever need anything, let me know. Right. Like all these different like hockey
Yeah.
people, GMs, like all these people that had gone on and now they were like GMs or presidents or coaches of NHL teams. And so I kind of thought about that. I started to build out a bit of like a networking list, honestly. Like I went through
No
all
way.
32 teams. Yep. Went through all 32 teams at the time, might have been 31 at the time, but went through all the teams. Who do I know? What position they're in? Use some of like my closest resources at the time to help me build that out as well. Um, and then I actually started with, rest in peace. I started with Ray Sherro, and he was someone that I had met and just had such a great like vibe from. Met him through USA Hockey. We had stayed in touch over like the course of those years. He was always someone that was just like, whenever you need anything, let me know. Like you're going to be so great. Like someday, like when want to move on to like the next phase of your hockey career, like always like texting me when we won big
No
games
way.
and stuff. Yeah. And so I sent him a message and I just said, Ray, I actually think I said like, I haven't talked to you in a while. Hope you remember me. It's Meghan Duggan. And he was so funny when he wrote back. He's like, you got to be kidding me. Um, but I just said, I'm looking to get into the industry, and you always said like if I ever need anything, like reach out. And I said at that point, like I was like not looking for a job. I just was like, where do you think the best place is to start? Like what type of things do I need to do to build my resume? And from there it just kind of took off. Like everyone who knew Ray knows his network, right? And he just started like connecting me with everyone. And
No way.
yeah, and so a lot of great connections through that. And
And is,
then
is
one
he
of
with the
them,
Devils at this time?
um, it was right in and around
Got it.
like
Okay.
when, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd have to look back, but he had I think Tom Fitzgerald was the GM at the time,
Yeah.
and they had just moved on from Ray, but Obviously he still had really close ties, still, did with all of our staff there. And so he connected me right away to Kate Madigan, now one of my like closest friends and managers. And so Kate and I had a great conversation, and then I pretty much, immediately hung up with her, and Tom Fitzgerald called me, and we just continued that dialogue and that conversation. And it was just an organic, natural fit, like right from the start. I had a few other like options and kind of like, stakes in the fire at that point with other teams. But it was something about, Fitzy and Kate and our leadership group there, and just where the Devils were at in their life cycle and where we were going. And, Fitzy's a Boston guy. There was a great connection there. We had a
Oh, there
lot
you
of,
go.
things in common. And so it just felt like the right fit. And obviously it was, and it has been. And so, yeah, so he offered me a job, and it didn't take me too long to take it. And here I am.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
You've got a degree in a Bachelor of Science in Biology from the University of Wisconsin. I guess two parts. Well, I'd be curious, like when you chose your, your academic pursuits, I guess, like what did you think you might do with it? And given your background in science, I guess, how has that maybe provided you a unique lens to view athlete development through?
Yeah, it's funny. Like when I think back to choosing my major, I think it was just mainly I was and like still am, from a fitness perspective. Like I'm just passionate about like how the human body works, and just like you said, from an athlete care perspective, from a training perspective. Now in my like post playing days, like all the things I'm into as it relates to like biohacking and just making sure my body feels great, and doing different events and things like that. So I think that's probably where it came from. When I was a kid, I used to say like I wanted to be a doctor, right? It's like one of
Yeah,
those one of those easy ones when you're a
yeah,
kid.
totally.
So I think I just went into it because I was passionate about it. I wanted to learn more, and I had the opportunity at Wisconsin with that major to do some really amazing things, like work with cadavers at UW Hospital, and really learn the human body and the way that it works at a deep level. And so I think as it relates to, now and how I'm applying that, like, no, obviously I'm not a doctor. And we have an unbelievable like sports science staff that, they're the subject matter expertise, or have the subject matter expertise there. But I think where it helps me is I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about training. I'm passionate about preparation. I'm passionate about the physical and mental aspect of like how you prepare your body to do something hard. And that's what our guys are doing every single day. I mean, to play pro hockey, it's hard. It's physically hard. It's mentally hard. And so to have an understanding of what they're going through because I did it, and then what their bodies are going through because I know a little bit about like physiologically how it works, I think it helps in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and I think that's what I just again we touched on just the amount of inputs I guess that are out there for players today, and it's having that knowledge to at least understand those. Where I would say like I would put myself in that shoes. Like I'm sure if I spent a day taking in all the information that you get, at least 50% of it would be like way over my head. Um, I read that you had the opportunity to interview for the Pittsburgh Penguins GM job when it was
Yeah.
last week, and perhaps there's been some other opportunities like that. But um, it just really dawned on me that it'd be one of those things, like it'd be really tough to prepare for that type of a moment unless you go through it. And I'd be curious, like anything that you took away or learned from that experience that's going to serve you in the future, and what might, I guess, for anybody that aspires to be in a role like that, like what are maybe some things that you might have learned to say, hey, I never really thought that was a part of the job, but clearly that's something I got to start thinking about.
Yeah, so that was, I mean, what a wild experience, right? I'm like 2 or 3 years in on the job, still learning a lot, and I remember I was in Utica at the time, and we were just starting our postseason. I think there we were in the first round of the playoffs, and so I'm in the hotel, and I get a call from Fitzy, and you know, like it didn't catch me by surprise. Like we're going back and forth on things all the time, and so I'm like, hey, what's up? And we were talking about a couple things, and I said, I got one more thing for you. And he said, I got a call that, Pittsburgh wants to interview you for their GM job. I was like, this is Meghan, right? Like, what? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I still felt so raw and,
Yeah.
so young, and that like I didn't know a lot, and obviously like a lot of people, a lot of women, like I discredited myself right away. I'm like, wow, why would they want to do that? And so he's like, well, think about it. Let me know. He said, obviously, even just to prepare for something like that's a lot. But he's like, I think like you could do it. And, I think they got the right person, and, I'm super proud of you, and all of that. And so it was, obviously that part of the conversation was great. And it just shows what a great leader Fitzy is. And so I hung up and I thought to myself, like, okay, I have like 24 hours to get back to them because they want to, interview, first round, all this kind of stuff. And
How
so
much time? So you have 24 hours. How much time did you have before potentially like
I think I had like a week to prep, like once I committed to it.
but you probably
So
don't have like a deck or anything on your desktop at this stage to,
oh my
yeah,
gosh, no
yeah, yeah,
way.
yeah,
So I was like, so really, so I was obviously honored, like super excited. And I thought to myself, like, okay, but this is, I need to be ready for this. Like, I don't go like one foot into anything. And so, I said yes, like I would take the interview, and, which I did. And I'm so, I would say one, like so happy I did. But also like really proud of myself, to be honest. And it's hard to say that too. Again, like no one says that a lot, but, it was, like I said, I was early in my career, and had to go through, a lot of just like the preparation, the execution of the interview. And my biggest takeaway was just like how much I learned through the whole process, like through the preparation. And I think one of my biggest takeaways was, in the preparation aspect, was just it's okay in a leadership role like that, right? Like I was like preparing for the job that I wanted, which was
yeah,
that role. And it's okay to lean on other people. Like I used so many resources. I used like Scott Litwack, who's now like our VP of hockey ops, to like talk me through everything he knows about like Penguins,
yeah,
like, just cap and contract status and all these things. Like I used him. I used, other mentors that I have. I reached out to Cammi Granato, who's a mentor of mine. Like, and I said to Cammi, like, oh my gosh, like, what should I be thinking about? Like, what are the questions I should be asking? So, and that's one of the biggest aspects. I don't know if we talked about this earlier, that I find in leadership, or I did. Like the best leaders ask questions. Like the best leaders aren't afraid to like surround themselves with the right cabinet, right? To say
yeah.
like, I don't know this, so I need my people to help me. And so I just kind of prepared in that manner. I just like learned and read and talked to people and practiced, and then yeah, just executing like a 90-minute sit down, like one-on-one, answering all those questions. What it feels like to be in that interview, like the pressure, like the difficulty of the questions, thinking on your feet. Obviously, I've been in a million interviews before, but this one just was different. And so it was a hard process to go through. I'm so happy I did it. I learned a ton. Asked them for feedback, which is helpful for me now moving forward. And I took it because that's the job I want someday, right? Like those are the positions I want to be in. Those are the interviews I want to have, and I'm going to continue to like learn and work towards getting there. Obviously, we talked about captains earlier, I think, right? There's 32 teams. There's only 32 captains. There's only 32 GMs. So tough jobs to get. But I've never shied away from, as we've talked about multiple times in this, like just doing the hard thing. And so just continuing to learn like the right way to go about it, to use the people around me to ask questions to and learn from, because, in Jersey right now, I think about how lucky I am, any given day, like whether it's with Tom Fitzgerald, Kate Madigan, Dan McKinnon, Marty Brodeur, Chuck Fletcher, one of our senior advisors there. It's just, I have the opportunity to learn from those individuals from a management perspective, like every day. And that's it's just great for, my growth and how I want to help our organization now, and just like, moving forward in my career.
I love that. I think just, I think great advice for so many folks that, aspire, whatever it is in their career. But just when you get those doors, like don't be afraid of, I guess, imposter syndrome, like walk through them
Totally. Yeah,
and
totally.
and take advantage of them. I know we're up against it, Megan. I got one last one here for you. So you
Yeah,
mentioned Cammi Granato. So when, we have these conversations, like I'll try and figure out like, who do I know that maybe knows the person I'm going to be chatting with that can provide some insight. So Cammy's a pal, and
oh
I've
nice.
reached
Oh
out to
yeah, you're a
her.
Vancouver guy.
Yeah. And so, and she was, unbelievably complimentary. And she's like, gosh, she's like, do you want funny stories? I'm like, no, I don't need any funny stories. I just, any insights you have. So she's like, well, gosh, like if I was a player, I'd want her to be my captain. And But then she pointed to a specific moment, which I think, in a we look at where the female game is at today. I would, as someone that has nothing to do with it, but my observation is that it's just been a compounding effect of a lot of people doing a lot of courageous things.
Yes.
That have got us to a point now where I think we're still very much in its infancy, but gosh, there's a lot of progress and momentum. Yeah. She pointed to a conference call that she was on with USA Hockey in 2017 when the U.S. women, said that they were not going to play. They were going to boycott the World Championships, which were being hosted in the United States. And she just said, she goes, I've never. She's like, I can't remember, every word of that conversation other than she's like, I've never been more proud to be a woman in hockey than listening to Meghan, stand up for what was right. And she just closed that she's a really amazing person. And so I'd be curious, like that moment. I just think that wasn't just you on the phone. I would think that there was a lot of conversation of getting a group of people and a group of women on side with doing something that was probably was very hard, but also came with a lot of unknowns.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Like Cammi is someone I hold at the highest regard. Like
yeah, she's amazing.
Above like anyone in leadership, anyone in hockey management. Like she is excellent. She's an excellent person. She's a great leader. She's a great friend. And so I appreciate that. I mean, I could like tear up, so I'll stop. But yeah, I remember that call like it was yesterday. It was a turning point in our team's kind of movement back then in 2017. And it was, the gist of it was I was representing our team because I was an athlete director within USA Hockey. I had a seat on that call, and thank God I did, because it was a call of an emergency board meeting, let's call it, 95 people, and it was 94
really?
to 1 at that point. Yeah, it was. I mean, maybe 93 to 2 because Cammi was on there.
Yeah.
But it was tough. I mean, no one wanted to hear from me. Everyone wanted to discredit what we were doing. I don't even know if they knew I was on the call. They weren't happy with what was going on. And I basically in the back of my head was like, this is it. Like, this is one of our team's moments. I have to have my team's back. Everything we've worked for, everyone I'm representing, and I had all my teammates like basically right there in my heart. And I just was, I just spoke up and I just said, I think you guys are wrong. Ultimately, high level, like this is what we're going through. Like the information you have is wrong. And we're serious, and this is where we're at. This is who we are. This is what we believe in. And that was that. It was pretty quiet after that. But I knew, now, like I remember the messages from Cammi after and during, like texting me. She's like, "You got this." And so she's always been in our corner. And, there was a lot of people during that movement that weren't in our corner. That was disappointing. And Cammi was just like at the top of the list of those that were. And that's what great leadership is, right? That's what, a great mentor is. That's what someone who knows what winning is, the ability to like do the hard thing, and to like stick out when it's hard. And, when you may lose some people or lose some friends, or not everyone believes in you. And so she's always done that. And to have learned from her, I'm just like very grateful.
Well, listen, Megan, I sense that sometimes when we're in those moments, it might not land with us like how historic they're going to be. But I think in just not just the history of the women's game, but our history of hockey in total, like we're really going to look back at that moment and just how much that moved our game forward collectively. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. Again, thank you so much for taking some time. I feel like we only scratched the surface, and I hope we can do this again down the road and catch up.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Love the pod, and hope the listeners enjoy it. And yeah, happy to chat further anytime. You guys know where to find me. So appreciate the dialogue. It was a great discussion.